Okay, so this is now clip number 3 for my, I think I zoomed in a little too much. This is clip number 3 for chapter 2 pertaining to inflation. Okay, so I want to talk about hyperinflation. So hyperinflation is just very high inflation. Okay, you might get, the prices of goods might double, let's say, in a week, or even worse than that. Basically, what ends up, or what can happen in a hyperinflationary scenario, is that money loses its functions. As I discuss in other videos, and your textbook does in chapter 18, it talks about following my rule of MSU, Maryland State University, or Michigan State University, or whatever. It can serve the role of medium of exchange, store of value, or unit of account. So, in particular, in a hyperinflationary environment, money loses the function of medium of exchange. So basically, the idea of a medium of exchange is that basically, right, you want to buy something, okay, and someone wants to sell something to you, and you exchange this piece of paper. Okay, it acts as that sort of thing in between that kind of helps seal the business deal, so to speak. Okay, so it's a medium of exchange. In a hyperinflationary environment, no one wants to hold the money, basically because it's dangerous to hold the money. Why? Because the money is losing its store of value property, right? In other words, instead of, let's say, the $1 buying a loaf of bread, now it takes $10 to buy that same loaf of bread. And in a really hyperinflationary environment, the money can lose its value so fast that, like for instance, between the time that you receive the money, let's say from wages, get your paycheck, the time you go and spend it, it's actually eroded that much in value. So it basically becomes worthless. You can't hold on to it. So basically what happens, everyone tries to get rid of their paper money. All right, they try to dump their money by either trying to buy goods, right, as fast as they can, so at least they can get something out of it, or they start switching to other forms of money. This is why things like gold and silver become popular again during periods of high inflation, because the idea is that if I own a hunk of, a bar of gold or some silver, then I can at least store my value. Okay, so that's basically hyperinflation. And the last term I wanted to find before I go on to the numerical calculation section, which is item agenda number 2 for the Consumer Price Index, is debt monetization. Okay, so you know what debt is, right? A lot of you probably are in debt because you have student loans, right? So you know what debt is. Okay, it just means that you've borrowed money from someone else. All right. But what does the monetization part of debt monetization means? Well, basically, here's what happens. Normally, if you're a government, okay, you have some power. Actually, you have a lot of power. And one of those powers is the power to tax. Okay? Because no one really has a choice. I mean, you are basically forced, coerced to pay taxes. I mean, no one asks you, do you want to pay income tax? No one asks you, do you really want to pay, the GST? I mean, you just are taxed, and that's just how it is. Unless you have like a government changes the rules or something, cancels the tax. But ultimately, you are at the whim of the government in power. Hence the reason why, certain groups try to get their guy or their person into the office so they can get what they want. right? So the monetization basically it occurs when the government can no longer basically pay for its day-to-day operations by taxing the people. Right? The people might revolt if tax rates get too high, or they might start sort of doing things sort of under the table, so to speak. You guys are getting people what they call black economy, or sort of under the table, not sort of legal transactions, but they go to illegal stuff. Right, so I'll pay you sort of under the table and won't report it, kind of thing, if tax rates get so high. Or what happens is governments get into a situation where no one wants to lend them any money. See, governments borrow lots of money. The market for government bonds is very big. Government debt. Okay. So that's because governments spend a lot of money, right? They build bridges and highways and have armies and so on. So governments borrow lots of money. And what can happen is the private sector, investors, can say to themselves, this government looks a little tipsy. It might default on the loans. In other words, the government might not pay us back. Okay, because maybe the government's going to lose the war or something, or something bad's going to happen. You got to remember, we're talking hyperinflation. We're talking about periods of great instability, as you will see from when we look at the German scenario in the early 1920s. This is lots of social unrest, lots of problems we're discussing. So that's why foreign lenders or even domestic lenders might say, I'm not lending money to this government, because they might collapse. They might not honor their debts. So then what happens is the government says to itself, what can we do? If we can't raise taxes and we can't borrow money anymore, no one wants to lend to us, then what they do is they basically try to make up this deficit by monetizing their debt. What that means is they create new money out of thin air to pay for their debt. I mean, effectively what they would do is they would go and say, we're going to create some new government bonds, okay, and we're going to pretty much coerce the central bank into buying these bonds. So the central bank would then buy the bonds and would become an asset of the central bank. Now, how does the central bank, like in our case it would be the Bank of Canada, United States is the Federal Reserve, how then do they do it? They just make money up out of nowhere. They just go to their printing press and just flick the switch on and say, go to town. And they make up a lot of money. And then of course they give the money to the government, and the government can go and spend it. And that is the idea of debt monetization. And as we will see from our look at history, this is a recipe for disaster. Alright, so now that all the terms have been defined, now I'm going to go on to the next clip, and we're going to look at a numerical example, hypothetical of course, of the consumer price index.